The main question today in this video is, should you use the option HDR always on your PlayStation 5 to play non-supported HDR games like the Touryst? And the short answer is yes. And after this intro, we know already the long answer is a little bit more complicated. But yes, I found that even non-supported HDR games, some of them are looking better because of the higher peak brightness. But still we need to keep in mind, we are not talking about native supported HDR. And I will show you a little bit and explain to you how you actually can find out if a game supports HDR or not, okay? But let's start with this menu here on the PlayStation 5, and we have HDR menu, and you can use off always on or on when supported. So what I found is also on when supported. In some games this is not correct, because Kena Bridge of Spirits starts in HDR, but there's no HDR native support in the game. So this is wrong, because, or let's say it like this, the game can say it's supported, but the game itself does not support native HDR, okay? We need to be very careful, okay? Just because we tick this and a game starts in HDR doesn't mean we have native HDR support, okay? So usually what I used was in many cases always on, because I don't want to that my TV or my PlayStation 5 is changing the mode, because I'm most of the time connected to my Elgato capturing card, and the problem is it is a little bit tricky sometimes to set this card up with different picture modes. That's why you actually see here also the video transfer rate is set to -2. That's when the Elgato capturing card is connected, because the card does not accept 4K HDR in RGB, okay? It has to be 420, and by the way, that's the quality what you can see on my Let's Play channel, so don't start commenting that the picture quality was in 420, okay? It is absolutely great, okay? Anyway, different topic. Okay, we have this option here, and yeah, usually I'm using always on because of the reason what I already told you. So this is what I'm using, and that's what you can also use. So now, not all of the games are behaving the same when you, let's say, force HDR. That's a thing what you need to test game by game. So what I can tell you in terms of the Touryst, it is working actually very, very nice. And the difference is, and this is now, I'm starting to explain now how you can actually find out if there's native HDR support or not, because on the LG CX it's actually quite simple. So we have the option HDRG and dynamic tone mapping on, and usually when you have something very bright like this here, the sun in the background, and this is displayed over half of the display, you will not see a big difference between HDRG and dynamic tone mapping. In most of the cases, when we're talking about a picture like this at the very moment with a very bright background, most likely dynamic tone mapping is slightly darker than HDRG. So, and this is regardless if HDRG is supported or not. And again, there's not a single game out there which is supporting HDRG. All what the games are supporting is the internal calibration menu on the PlayStation 5, okay? But also this has nothing to do with finding out if a game supports actually real HDR or not. Okay, I mean, the other thing of course is, if there is no option in terms of HDR, then most likely it is also not supported. But we have a few games where we don't have any settings here and everything is just handled by the PlayStation 5, okay? That means these settings here, which I just show you very quickly, and that's this one, adjust HDR. That's the settings I'm talking about. So we have a few games where you set up your HDR capability from your TV through this menu, and then the game takes the information and displays HDR. And now again, why there is no single game out there which supports HDR, because all what we're doing with this menu, actually, we're setting up the HDR capability from the screen. And what we're doing with our menu on the LG ZX, we're changing the behavior how HDR gets displayed. Let's make it very easy, okay? So HDR is using a different method over dynamic tone mapping. You can see, hopefully, here's my, can you see the sun here? It's changing. Anyway, that's why there is not a single game which is supporting HDR. The game's just supporting this menu. And of course, if a game supports this menu, we can use HDR, and then we have a much better HDR over dynamic tone mapping. But again, not a single game supports HDR. Okay, anyway, we have this menu here, and when we don't have any calibration menu in or HDR settings in a game, we have maybe 5-10 games which are supporting this menu, and then everything is taken by this menu, or the game reads these values from this menu and take it from there. Okay, so that's how it works. Anyway, so let me just jump back into the Touryst. So there's one very big thing to consider. So first of all, I will show you this again. Where's my son? Here's my son. So again, this is very clear because we have a very big difference here. And here also there's nothing changing. HDR and dynamic tone mapping off would gives you a difference as well, but there's nothing changing. So that means this game does not support HDR at all. So, okay, that's done. Okay, we know now how we can find out if a game supports HDR. So now very important is, if you like to play a game in HDR, a non-supported HDR game, you have to use dynamic tone mapping on. Otherwise, you're not getting any benefit at all if you're forcing your PlayStation in HDR, because you can see that's the difference. And we're talking about in dynamic tone mapping off and HDR about the normal SDR brightness. That's the same when you turn off HDR, and I'm measuring this. I have the same value as with HDR and HDR. Exactly the same value, because there is no HDR. That's why HDR is not doing anything. That's why you have to use dynamic tone mapping on in non-supported HDR games. So the other thing what we really need to consider, not all the games looking good when you force HDR. There can be a very big difference. So you need to check it out, you need to test it. I found actually in games like Kina, Bridge of Spirits, and also in the Touryst, the HDR effects is actually really not HDR effects. That's wrong, okay? I'm not talking about HDR effects. The higher brightness, that's what's happening. It's nothing else. We don't have HDR. All what dynamic tone mapping is doing is actually applying a higher brightness to the screen. That's what's happening. But in many cases, this is better because it looks better. The colors are a little bit more vibrant probably and stuff like that. You know, it is more pleasant for the eyes, to be very honest. SDR sometimes in many cases it's a little bit too less, a little bit too dull, a little bit too dark. And dynamic tone mapping on in non-supported HDR games, so far as I can see, in Kina, Bridge of Spirits, and in the Touryst, is doing a really great job. But again, this can change from game to game. Okay, so that's already for this video. So go ahead, give it a try. Put your PlayStation in HDR always on. Try a couple of games where you think or you know that there's no native support, like the Touryst and many other indie games probably, but just give it a try, because it will improve in many cases, in many games. It will improve the picture, but also it can happen that you have actually a little bit of a worse picture, because maybe it will over brighten too much some highlights or whatever. So you need to test this really. Okay, so there's no guarantee that this is improving all the games which are supporting no HDR. Okay, so anyway, this game is on my list to get played next after my game Kina, Bridge of Spirits. And see, this is really bright because dynamic tone mapping is doing in this case a really good job. we still have the disadvantage about the 5 to 6 seconds rule, what it takes to adjust the picture. But again, I really think that games like this, and you can see how bright this now is. And again, what I have found is I measured a couple of lights and whatsoever. There is no chance at all that I had a peak brightness over 600 candela. Not at all, because this is not how it works, because we don't have native HDR. This is most likely around 400 to 500 candela, maybe 550, but not 650 or 700, close to 700. Anyway, that's enough for this video. I'm looking forward for your comments in the comment section about this. Post your experience, what you have. Put a couple of games in where you think or where you know there's no native HDR support, and maybe you can recommend to play it with forced HDR or not. So that's for this video. I say thank you very much for watching me. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.